I am newly retired. I spent more than 20 years as a marketing and communications person for an architecture and urban planning firm. Actually, two firms, but mainly one firm over the course of my career. What do I do? I was the chair of the official community plan advisory committee from 2020 to 2022. We were working on the draft OCP, spent about 18 months doing engagement with the community to get their voice into making this plan. I'm currently on the land use committee with the District of Sooke. I'm an active volunteer. I'm a director with Friends of Sooke Parks. I'm an executive committee member on the Sooke Garden Club. What else? I'm a volunteer with Emergency Services, and I'm sure I'm forgetting something. And I also attend council meetings on a regular basis.
So that's a thumbnail. Let's dig down a little bit. So where were you before you came to Sooke?
I was in Vancouver, in downtown, the West End. I grew up in Parksville, and then I graduated and high school. I went to UVic, and I got a bachelor's degree there in it wasn't English. It was a long time ago. Now I should know what I have a degree in, shouldn't I?
Too much has happened since then.
Yeah. Liberal studies, that's what it was. Yeah, very useful. But actually it was a great degree because it was, I was one of those kids that didn't really know what they wanted to do. I always did well in geography and English and stuff. And I thought maybe I'd be a journalist or, really there wasn't a lot of career guidance. I could be a housewife, a teacher, a secretary. They started this Great Books program, and it was fascinating. We just did a little bit of everything, so really well-rounded.
There are some people these days who would say a liberal arts education maybe wouldn't be a bad thing to bring back.
Yeah, probably not. And no, it was good for me. I would never have read those things without some prodding, so it was great thing to do.
So were you a bookworm as a kid?
I was. I would steal whatever books my dad was reading, and he didn't think they were appropriate, and I would steal them, and I would go under the covers with a flashlight, and I would read, and then I would make sure that I put the bookmark in the same. And sometimes I was faster than him, so it would annoy me. But I was a bookworm.
For those people who are bookworms when they're kids, very often, as you just mentioned, you're reading well beyond your comprehension or your ability to contextualize what you're reading. Right. Do you remember anything you read as a kid that later on you went, oh, that's what that was about?
I remember reading Sybil. About the woman with the multi-personalities or something like that. And for sure, my father didn't want me reading that. But anyway, I obviously probably didn't know anything about that. But mostly music. Now, I think it's mostly music. I look back now, and I can, you can sing along, all the lyrics. And then I start to say them, I'm like, oh, that's what that meant. That is super inappropriate for a 12-year-old. But
that whole generation was like that.
Yeah, no, and our parents never said anything, or anyway.
It's harder to find a song that actually is appropriate than the many that are not if you're from that generation.
A lot of them are super creepy by today's standards, so.
It's funny because I wrestle with that, but I think it's a snapshot into the past that should not be forgotten either.
True, yes.
So when we say super creepy, it's largely around the way women were portrayed in song and in music. So how did that, or now you mention it, I'm taking that you're a feminist, but should I do that?
No, you definitely should do that. I hope all of us are feminists. But I was raised by a single dad. So I don't think until I was a teenager, I was really aware of the different roles, the different gender roles. I had to take care of myself. My dad was a great dad, but, he was a man of the 60s and 70s. So, I made my way to school. I was cooking early. Nobody reminded me about my homework, that kind of stuff. But as I got a little bit older, I have one distinct memory where, and my dad was always interested in religion, and we'd go to these, he was a teacher, so we had the summers off, so we'd travel and we'd go to these weird commune hippie things. And we went to one place and they said, okay, well, the guys are all going out to do this and all the women are going into the kitchen to do the dishes. And I remember being so irate about that because I wanted to go outside and yet I ended up in a kitchen with an apron doing. So that was the first time that, and I remember that so distinctly. Right.
So how did that take you into understanding feminism and becoming a feminist? It seems like a simple question, but it's actually
it's
harder.
A simple question. I just couldn't fathom that the fact that I was at the time a girl made me kind of less of a person, that I couldn't do exactly what I wanted to do. I mean, probably nobody can, but I had no understanding that gender would hold me back. And I have to admit, as you get in your teenage years, you start to use gender a little bit, to your advantage. Like I have a flat tire. I'm a girl. I don't know how to change it. Somebody help me. So, you start to manipulate it. I have to say, but
our generation was raised that way.
Yeah, and even though my dad was a teacher, I realized later, he never encouraged me to go to university. It's just something I wanted to do. And he was quite proud I did. But I mean, it would have been enough for him if I had gotten married and right out of high school, which so many of my friends did. And that's a wonderful thing to do. But it was of the generation. There was, even though it was, I used to watch Mary Tyler Moore and always imagine I'd go to the big city and do, those things were very exciting. But the encouragement wasn't there.
So without the encouragement, what is it in you that made you go to university and strike out and explore the world a bit?
Oh, I have to say the Vancouver Island of the early 80s, well, there was a huge recession. There were no jobs. I had, a summer job since I was 13 and was putting money aside because really there was no where to spend your money. And then, of course, interest rates were through the roof, and I didn't think I could afford it. And I went to get my money out, and it had doubled or tripled. I didn't understand interest rates. So suddenly I had this kind of whack of money, and I could afford to go to university. So, and by university, I went to 2 years at Malaspina College. So I totally love the college idea because it's something that people from smaller communities can go to. I could live at home and drive to college, sometimes you go to college and you just meet your people, and it's inspiring, and you're growing up, but you're still kind of in the safe environment.
So it's interesting because you weren't discouraged from going to university, so it wasn't exactly an act of rebellion, but it was an act of independence.
Definitely an act of independence, and I really wanted to, I wanted to get out of Parksville so bad, so Parksville's lovely, but yeah, the island of the 1980s wasn't terribly inspiring. I think if you wanted, you kind of had to go off and do something, and then here I am. I swore I'd never come back to the island, and suddenly it's this amazing, magical place that everyone wants to be. And I'm like, why couldn't I have seen that? Like, I'm going to say 30, but it's 40 years ago.
Shh, we won't tell anyone. You went to university, got this liberal arts education, and then how did you hone in on what really interested you?
I have to say I've always rather fallen into things. Again, there weren't a lot of jobs. So I went off to Banff for supposed to be a summer. I ended up living there for 5 years. I learned how to ski. I worked in a ski resort in the office, so that was kind of fun. I just met a bunch of wonderful people. I did a little bit of traveling, and got married. And then we just slowly made everyone said, you got to leave Banff. You got to grow up and come home. So I decided that it was time to grow up and come home. So I ended up back in Vancouver, and I got a job with a real estate developer. It was just a small family-run, really wonderful people. I've been blessed just to keep running into wonderful people that kind of guide you, and they affect your life in ways you can never imagine. So I worked there for probably close to 10 years. And then I had a good friend that was working in an architecture firm, and I'd met her boss, and he said, "Oh, come work for me. I need a communications person. You have an English liberal." He was actually very impressed with my liberal arts degree. And he's like, "Come and work for me." So I did that, ended up doing that for almost 20 years until he passed away.
You had come from Parksville. You'd gone to Banff.
Yeah.
You'd been to UVic, but not necessarily a big city. Yeah. When you got to Vancouver, did you feel like I'm a city person, I like this?
Yeah, I was having my Mary Tyler Moore moment. I had, and I was no longer married, and I got my first, because, you live at home, and then I got roommates, and I got married, so I actually never lived alone. So I got my first bachelor apartment, and I just remember it was just, I would come home, and I'd be just so excited.
And in those days, when you didn't just spend a lot of money, you were very crafty with the way you decorated.
Exactly. And thrifting and, garage sales and stuff like that. So, I still remember that little place. But I realized, it's the first time and I think the last time I've ever lived alone. But
so how did you end up going from that and coming back to Sooke?
I met a man. Online. So I had a son at the time, a young son, and he was very into Lego. And I asked him for Christmas. He was about 8 years old, and I asked him what he wanted for Christmas, and he said he wanted a BC Ferry, something he could drive his cars and trucks on. And I was like, where am I going to get a BC Ferry? And the internet was kind of still in infancy then, but I found somebody that was a Lego master, and he had made this giant BC Ferry. So I reached out to him. I said, could I pay you to make me a BC Ferry? He said, I have too many, but I'll give you the plans. So he gave me the plans, and he showed me how there's a whole Lego community online. You can upload, look for bricks, stuff like that. So he said, I'll teach you how to do that. And I remember the plans, he charged me $7. And luckily I was working for an architecture company because they were architectural plans. I had to print them all out. And I worked on this ferry for months. After my son would go to bed, I had it all under. Anyway, it was an amazing success, my ferry. He was blown away on Christmas morning. He told me, now I know Santa exists because you can't get this in a store. But when I came back to work, the woman who had the desk beside me, she goes, I am so sick of you talking about BC Ferries and Lego. She goes, you got to start dating. So she put me on online, and Rob, I think I can say his name, was the first person I met. And he was just incredible and still is incredible. And as I posted today on our Father's Day, some people just come into your life at the exact right moment. And my son loved him. I loved, if your child loves your new person, that is an amazing gift.
So, and he was from Sooke?
He originally he's an Ontario boy, but he's been in Sooke since the late 1990s.
You were coming from Parksville. What did you think of Sooke when you arrived 17 years ago?
Funny enough, I had never been to Sooke. I'd heard about it, but never been. It was our first date. And of course, I was thinking that online dating was still a little risky and strange. But I had communicated. He seemed like a nice guy. So he said we were going to go to a place called Point No Point. And so I came here. It seemed all lovely. And then we started driving. And then I lost cell phone reception. And I'm thinking, my friend said, you're going to be murdered. And we drove out to this. And I was like, oh, okay. Was this a smart idea? But anyway, we ended up having a lovely lunch at Point No Point. And, I'm still here, so I wasn't. And then we went on for a walk at Sandcut Beach, and it was lovely. And yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
How long did it take you, being in Sooke, to start thinking, I have some ideas about this place, and I'd like to talk to other people who have ideas about this place?
Yeah. So we bought this little house that we're in, and we're right downtown Sooke. And I remember the realtor going, it had been on the market for a long time, and the realtor saying, "Why would anyone? Why would you want to live here when you could live?" And I was from downtown Vancouver. I thought this was great. I love walking everywhere, and I had looked at the because I have a career in working with urban planners and stuff. So I looked up the official community plan, and it's going to be this wonderful walkable oceanside village. And beside me was just an empty lot, and it was destined to be what they called Artisan Alley. It was going to be full of little shops and stuff. And I'm like, well, isn't this perfect? I have a park across the street. Lovely. And we bought the house and love this little place. And, within a year or so, they were going to turn the property beside me into a car wash, Artisan Alley to a car wash. They were going to change the zoning for it. And I was like, what the heck? For one thing, our OCP says no automotive services in the town core. I mean, if you have a car, you can drive to the edge of town and wash your car. You don't take this prime real estate in downtown. So we fought really hard. It's when I got to know my neighbors and, got different people involved. We absolutely lost. There is a car wash there that is now being torn down, and I understand this is a rumor, but I have been told that they want to make it into little shops and things. So I said, well, imagine if they had done that 10 years ago. So that was kind of my first introduction to not following plans. And it just, we all, as a community, we put so much effort into making a community plan, and then just to see it tossed out like that is heartbreaking. And one thing I've learned about planning is that, when you build something, it affects what's built beside it and what's built beside it. So, I mean, you build a car wash. What can you put beside a car wash? You're not going to put a restaurant or So here we are 10 years later, it's being torn down. It was the wrong location. It is a beautiful location. So that was my first foyer in. And then more recently was the park across the street, which was a privately owned piece of land, but it's zoned P1, public recreation. It's our only little bit of land in the downtown core that is a park, and this area is destined for multifamily. So there's going to be, and I came from living in a condo in downtown Vancouver, knowing how important it is to have parks and just a walkable community, somewhere you can take your kid after dinner and let them run off steam. Anyway, and it is supported as a park in our official community plan and our Parks and Trails plan. It's now been rezoned commercial. So, yeah, we lost that one too. But you keep trying. And I feel like after being in the OCP and really listening to people, if I could sum it up, Sooke's a special place. We're unique, and people want to keep that uniqueness. Maybe we're not entirely a small town anymore, but we want that small town feeling.
When you say we're unique, what does that mean to you?
We don't want to be Langford, if I can put it bluntly. We appreciate Langford, and certainly we could use some more commercial, definitely in our town, but we don't want to be blasting up our mountains. We don't want that. There's something lovely about leaving Langford and I don't want to slag Langford because they are their own community, but we moved here for a reason. But we leave Langford and, and we're suddenly in this nice green drive. And it's just like you take a breath, relax, and you drive into Sooke. And it's different. It's unique. I mean, it's not like we don't have our issues, but there's huge potential here.
When you say there's huge potential here, you could say that to a room full of people, yes, and half of them would have one vision in their head and the other half would have another vision in their head. So how do you come to a common vision?
That's a fair comment. Common vision. Well, I would go back to I believe we're all united in the fact that we want to keep Sooke unique. I think we all want to take advantage of the waterfront. We don't want to lose don't really have much public access, but we'd like to have access to our waterfront. We want to keep our hills green. We want to keep that feeling of friendliness and knowing your neighbors. And don't know if I'm answering this question, but I think we all share that. We might have different approaches to achieving it, but we all share that vision for Sooke.
I think it's reasonable to say, given the events in the United States and world reaction to them, that the economy at best is going to change focus, at worst may take a hit, and I don't think necessarily Canada will be immune from that. If that happens, we've been a community predicated on growth because of a constantly growing and thriving economy. So if the economy is different, how do you think Sooke should respond to that? What would change in your mind and your vision of Sooke to respond to that?
Well, I'm no economist, but I hope I'm not coming across that I'm against growth, because I'm certainly not against growth. I mean, growth is inevitable. I don't want to say smart growth. It seems like, it's an overused term, but planning is so important, and it absolutely makes sense to have more density in the town core. And but when we don't want sprawl, so maybe a slower economy will prevent some sprawl. So that might not be a bad thing. That's maybe a slower economy will give us a chance to create some plans. One of the things that we haven't passed the OCP yet, the new draft OCP. Another reason, as I mentioned, I was the chair of that Citizens Advisory Committee. Another reason why I'm stepping forward. I'd like to see it passed. And the number one thing on that is to do a town center plan, because our old town center plan is from 2008, and it needs to be updated. Before we start dropping things, let's have a plan. Let's figure out where the trails are going to go. Let's figure out the connections.
We've veered a lot into talking more sort of policy here.
Yes.
I guess one of the things that I'm always interested in is, what's your natural inclination through life's ups and downs,
Right.
when life goes into a down cycle? How do you respond to that?
I was just talking to someone yesterday, and we were talking about the great power outage last year. And actually it was because of the trees on Murray Road here. They fell over, and I think we were out with power for more than 24 hours here, which has never happened to me before. Anyway, that person was talking about it. They had just moved to town, so this happened, and they said they didn't know any of their neighbors, but because of that 24 hours of no power, they got to know all their neighbors. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, I always find, like, even in the worst of times, something magical and wonderful happens, and sometimes it just brings us together and we become more creative. Kind of like COVID, we would have never done a lot of the work from home, and instantly, like, the next day was just, everybody pack up your computers, you're working from home, and we made it work. I mean, and lots of people are continuing to work from home, and it's wonderful for a lot of people. And we would have never done that without kind of a crisis. So crisis brings innovation and new ways of thinking. And
So are you the person who rolls up their sleeves and gets out there and fills the sandbags, or are you the person who sits in the office strategizing what you need to do?
I think I'm a bit of both. I'm definitely a doer, but I'm also a spreadsheet person and computer. So I think I'm a bit of both. I'm in the emergency services, so I definitely believe in being prepared. It makes me feel good. If I know what's happening, I feel better. And I want to share the right information. I want to share the correct information. So
I tend to be that way myself, and some people think that you're a bit of a doomsayer, or you live in the worst of times, or you anticipate the worst of times, because there are people who don't find that a comfort. But you're saying you do find it a comfort.
Oh, absolutely. I find it a comfort. And I think by being prepared, it won't be the worst of times. Yeah, I'm the person that, we go on a hike and I'll bring a bunch of Band-Aids and a bunch of like blister stuff. And so, you're glad I thought of that. Got an extra chocolate bar.
So when you were a kid,
Yeah.
could you have envisioned yourself running for office?
Probably my friends could have. Yeah, because I was I mentioned my dad was a teacher. So I think I didn't have the same fear of authority. Teachers were just normal people. They were over at my house in the evening, and I heard them talking, and so they weren't really anything I wasn't scared of teachers or something like that. So it allowed me to speak up, and if I saw something not right, I'd be like, speaking up about it. So,
Bit of an injustice crusader.
I think so. Yeah, I think we all deserve a voice and equity, and yeah, I don't know. I try to keep a sense of joy to it and a sense of humor. Life doesn't have to be miserable, even when there's serious things around us.
That's a great philosophy. What's the driver behind that philosophy?
I think it's just a bit of my personality. I'm definitely a glass half full person. I would annoy sometimes people on Monday mornings. They're like, "Stop it!" But yeah, just I don't know, actually, just the way I am.
When you see something in another politician, local, federal, provincial, whatever, what's the one thing you appreciate in any politician that you've admired?
I'm in love with Wab Kinew right now, because he just speaks normally. He speaks like a normal person. And my son, when he became of age and he could vote and he's starting to he goes, why do they talk like that, Mom? So it's a lot of it is just empty words, and I appreciate there's probably some reasons that they can't be completely, I don't want to say honest, but they can't reveal all their cards because things are in negotiation and stuff like that. But sometimes it just does seem like empty. The words are empty. So I guess Wab Kinew, when he gets up and speaks, I'm just like, yes, we need more people like him, because he just speaks to the people, and I don't feel like he's holding back. So he's being truthful, I hope.
And one last question.
Yes.
What kind of music do you listen to?
Oh, it goes all over the place, and I should listen to more music. I think that's sad, like the turning down the radio so I can drive better or something. It's happening to me. But I definitely listen to music of my childhood. I was just at the dentist yesterday, and I think they had the early 80s dance playlist, so I was trying not to move while they were cleaning my teeth. A plug for the Sooke Folk coffee house down the street from me on, I forget which, it's a Saturday night. Once it's stopped now, but it'll start up again. And Sooke has the best musicians. They have open mic for the first hour, and I think it's $10 to get in. It is a deal. And then they have a feature performer in the second half, which is sometimes more expensive depending who it is. It is the best. There are just people like rocking out down there. I can't say enough things. My husband and I come home, we're just grinning. It's just so fabulous.
So do you have a favorite song at the moment?
Do I have a favorite song at the moment? Oh, gosh. No.
I get to pick whatever I want for you then.
Whatever you want. Oh, gosh. Can I get back to you on that? Okay. That's a lot of choice. Yeah.
It is. Thank you so much for sitting down to talk with me today. I've really appreciated this.
This has been lovely. Thank you.